Welcome to Secret Story. Dear friends, thank you very much for watching. Leave comments, put likes, share with friends and subscribe to the channel. Large families were common in the northeast of Scotland. I was one of 7 siblings, 4 girls, and 3 boys. We were poor but still had a good upbringing. As the eldest, I helped my mother to look after my brothers and sisters and with the running of the house. I started work as a kitchen maid as soon as I could leave school. I was not good looking, and despite my best efforts, I found myself on the shelf. I, therefore, decided to try to get a more rewarding job. Domestic service was not for me. I did evening classes and after a couple of years took up a junior administrator post in a city-based company. I continued to study at college part-time and worked my way up within the company to become their production manager. I had a successful, albeit solitary, life. Life changed 4 years ago. My youngest sister became seriously ill and hospitalized. Brian, her 18-year-old son, needed a home. He was a rough and disruptive kid, always getting into trouble. None of our family could cope with him, so he finally ended up living with me, a 50-year-old spinster. Brian had been doing his own thing at home, acting up, mixing with a wrong crowd and getting away with everything. He was rude and tried to play the macho man with me. I decided to stamp on this behavior immediately and set out clear ground rules for him. He seemed to take this on board, and for the first few days, other than being untidy around the house, he was well behaved, punctual and quite polite. This situation came to an end on Friday night. He did not appear for dinner and was still not home by early evening. He eventually sauntered in around 9 o'clock. When I asked him where he had been, he was very lippy and rude. "You should have been here hours ago, or at least have let me know where you were. I have been worried sick. I've been out with my mates. If you were worrying, that is your problem." I was exasperated but tried to be reasonable. "It is okay to meet up with your friends, but you must always tell me where you are, who you are with and when you will be home. Those are the ground rules." That just triggered a height of abuse and swearing. Essentially, Brian would do as he pleased. What can you do? Are you going to ground me? Mother did that, and I just ignored her. So, there. That was the final straw. I remembered what my parents did when we broke the rules. "No, I'll not ground you, I have a much better remedy." Before Brian knew what was happening, I grabbed him. "You cannot run away when they are around your ankles. My mum had used the same trick with me." I told him to bend over the sofa. "You can't be serious. I'm too old. I'll have the social services on you if you lay a finger on me." "I don't intend to use my fingers. There is no discussion here. Bend over." He finally realized that I meant it and that he had no way out. I picked up a slipper. "From now on, this is what will happen every time you misbehave or break the rules." I spanked him again and again until he was begging me to stop. "I will stop when I think you have got the message." And he broke down sobbing and wailing. Then I stopped and told him to stand up. I pulled him towards me and hugged him. "I do care and will always look out for you, but you must learn to behave and obey the rules. Go to bed, and we'll talk in the morning." I did not sleep much. I felt guilty. I had lost it and spanked Brian without thinking of the severity or consequences. However, he needed bringing in line. And maybe this very sharp shock would do it. Brian came down to breakfast. He sat down quite gingerly. He was very apologetic about what he had done and promised never to it again. Nice to hear, but I was not so naive as to think it would last. "Let's just start with a clean slate from today." When he had finished his breakfast, Brian helped me with the dishes. A first as far as I knew. "I want you to put your laundry in the basket and tidy your room, but once done, you can go meet up with your friends." Surprisingly, he said that he would stay in his room and watch television. Again, this was a first for the weekend. Later, I realized that having to explain to his mates that his auntie had spanked him would do nothing for his street cred. Later in the day, I found myself outside Brian's bedroom. The door was partly open, and I glanced in. He was busy doing what teenage boys often do. He was horrified to see me standing there and desperately tried to cover himself. I did not say anything and continued through to my room. I prepared the evening meal and called for Brian to come down. He was very hesitant and apologetic. "I am sorry. It won't do it again. Please don't spank me. What do you think you've done wrong?" He looked shocked that I knew the expression, "Yes. I know it is bad, but sometimes I cannot help myself." "You were not doing anything wrong, you were doing what all boys do at times." He looked flabbergasted. "You mean that you are not upset? You don't think of me as weird? Where did you get that idea from?" "My mates. Few girls of your age have even kissed a boy, let alone have gone all the way. Is normal. You are growing and trying to learn about your body. It is good for you." He looked at me quizzically. "How do you know?" I could see there were all sorts of questions whirling around in his head. "Enjoy it, but don't overdo it and be discreet. Keep your bedroom door shut. You are the first adult to be frank with me." I tried to ask my mom about the changes that have been happening to me, but she just refused to talk. I was shocked by this, but not entirely fazed. My sister is a prude and probably too embarrassed to talk to her son about anything intimate. The result is that Brian has been trying to understand what was happening to him during the roller coaster years of puberty, with his mates as the only source of half-truths. Not good. I wonder if this is a big part his problems. If you want to ask or talk about anything, please come to me no matter how small, personal or intimate the question. I will give you the best help I can, and I promise I will not get upset or too embarrassed. I have loads of questions. Let's start tomorrow and take it from there." After watching television for a couple of hours, we went off to bed. As we were going upstairs, I cheekily said to Brian, "Try to get plenty of rest tonight, don't exhaust yourself." He blushed that we were having breakfast next morning when the first question came. I was in for a shock because I expected that but no, it was far more fundamental. "I want to give you a proper answer. I will think about it, and we can talk after lunch." We did the washing up, and he went off to his room, I think a little disappointed that I puzzled for a few hours on how to deal with this until I finally concluded that the only answer was for him to see for real. After lunch, we went up to my bedroom. He was hesitant but did so that I thought I knew where we go to next, but no, then we got to the point about which I was apprehensive. "Can I see?" I went the brightest shade of red possible, but I knew this was inevitable. "Yes. It is the equivalent of a USB port for a boy's memory stick." I thought this a good analogy but may just have confused him. Thankfully, at this stage, he seemed to be okay with this. I was worried he would want more detail. "Is that what you do?" I must have been glowing fire red by then but managed to give a flustered, "Yes." "Is there anything else you want to ask?" "No, not now." I told him to sit down and watch. I wanted him to become familiar with the female form and clothes. He looked intently but was less goggle-eyed than before. "You cannot talk about this afternoon to anyone. If your mates question your new knowledge, just say that you and your auntie watched a film together for you to learn some basics." "Yes, I do. Thank you for teaching me." We had an evening meal, rested and watched television before going off to bed. Monday morning came around. Brian was up early, dressed and ready for the school bus in plenty of time. Unheard of before, maybe he was turning over a new leaf that I went to work. The day was uneventful, and I arrived home at the same time as Brian. He came straight from school instead of hanging out for a while. He was positively buoyant. I made dinner, and we ate it together. "How did your day go?" My mates were boasting about their weekend. They all had multiple times, so they said. "What did you do?" I listened, smiled and said nothing. I thought it the best approach. "You were correct that I was pleased with Brian. It was amazing the change in him when he had a few real facts at his disposal. Things went well for the rest of the week. He was keen to do his schoolwork and happy to ask for help when he was struggling. Friday came around, and he asked if he could go to the mall with his mates to hang out after school. "You have worked hard all week, that will be okay provided you are back by 8 in the evening." He went off to school, and I went to work. I had a rough and tiring day, and I fell asleep on the sofa soon after arriving home. I awakened with a start when I felt something touch my leg. Brian, I slapped him away. "What the are you doing?" "Sorry. Sorry. After everything we've discussed, you still did that?" "Yeah, I've been stupid." "What did I tell you?" "Not to touch without consent." "I was asleep." "How or when did I give permission?" "You broke the rules, and you know what happens next." "Bend over." He knew he was in the wrong and did not argue. I was so angry with him. I grabbed a wooden hairbrush and he was crying and begging for forgiveness. I gave him another 10 for good measure to make clear to him how angry I was. I did not try to console him this time. "Go to bed. You need to think clearly about what you did and why. We will talk about this tomorrow." I felt angry and betrayed, but surprisingly also relieved that at least he tried it on me and not a stranger. It prevented problems with the law and gave me the chance to get through to him that this was unacceptable. Brian came down late for breakfast, putting off meeting me face to face for as long as possible, but also because he was very sore. After breakfast in silence, I asked, "Why did you do it?" "I did but was embarrassed in front of my mates by the one." He said she enjoyed it. "After all we have talked about, you still believe this rubbish?" "He has not done it. He said it to make you react because it was your friend. You fell into his trap. I do not know why, but I could not stop myself. Be sure, I will reinforce the message if need be. I am most disappointed that you did not ask about it. I told you that we could talk about anything. I will not be angry or too embarrassed to answer or find a solution. I am so ashamed of myself." He was crying that I can hardly believe what I said next. "If you still want, then ask me. I may refuse, agree, or suggest alternatives, but that will be my choice." He spluttered something, but I persisted. "Ask me if you want to do it." "Can I?" "Right now, yes. Come over here and sit down beside me." He did so. "What did you find out?" "I couldn't get in." That is how a girl will react if she does not consent. Now, see what happens when it is consenting. I could hardly believe that. Told him to try again. "Thank you, I have learned so much. Think about the implications of that. Don't be messed up or get into trouble because of your so-called mates. What would have happened if you tried to feel up a stranger? In future, don't act on impulse. Come and ask me if you're unsure. I am so sorry, I won't do anything like that again." It was better he learned in a safe, controlled environment instead of finding himself in trouble by trying it on some unfortunate girl. Also, I wanted to show him that he could safely ask me about anything, but he must ask. I was doing the laundry when Brian came back downstairs. I had washed and dried all his clothes. So, I showed him how to iron and fold them up. He busied himself, while I did my clothes, including hand-washing my. It was clear that this distracted him because he kept looking in my direction and managed to scald his finger on the iron. "Come here, you seem to be fascinated by my." "No, I'm not." "Well, your trousers do look so different from my trousers. They are so soft and delicate. In fact, all your clothes are lovely. Females are complicated, as you will find out in time. Girls need to feel different, special and girly. I'm sure all those in your class don't dress the same." "No, they don't. The girls did up to last year, but the school uniform is not compulsory for final year pupils. Most have been changing to more eye-catching styles. Officially, the school disapproves, but the male teachers aren't upset." I could see he was intrigued, so an idea came to mind. Brian is a macho guy, but an appreciation of feminine things could make him a more rounded person. Why don't you find out what they feel like? You can try on some of my clothes, they are about your size. I will help you. No, I am a boy. I can't wear girls' clothes. Nonetheless, I could see an interest in his eyes. After lunch, I went to my room and sorted out some things. I called Brian. I hadn't planned it, but Brian had learned a valuable lesson today that we spend the afternoon doing jobs about the house. We finished off the chores and prepared dinner. Brian, you need to watch me. I ran my hand over the back of my skirt to smooth it out as I sat down. You need to do the same to stop your dress creasing when sitting. We finished our dinner and tidied up. Let's go for a walk in the garden. You mean outside, dressed like this? Sure, there is no one around, and the fresh air will do us good. This has been the most enjoyable afternoon. I love the clothes but also appreciate the difficulties they pose for the girls. Yes, you needed to experience the problem to appreciate how difficult it can be. A girl can never relax in a loose dress or skirt. Now, I understand why that young girl at school ran off crying when it happened to her. It has been a fascinating day. Can I dress up again tomorrow? My bedroom became a changing room for most of the next morning as Brian tried various combinations of my clothes. Before settling on a white blouse and black pencil skirt. They suited him well. He had learned from yesterday but was about to find out that this skirt type has its difficulties. I fitted a wig, did his makeup and gave him a pair of court 2-inch heel shoes. I will admit he looked good and girly, but he did struggle with the restricted movement and keeping his balance on heels. He slowly got the hang of things and was easily getting around by afternoon, so we went for a walk along the coast. I could see he got nervous when anyone approached but held him close. Don't worry, they only see a mother and her daughter out for a walk. We had finished our evening meal when Brian said, "The last 2 days have been so right for me. I have learned so much about girls' clothing. Even my ankles are hurting tonight. Don't agonize too much. Girls love to dress up beautifully, no matter these discomforts. Just appreciate the effort they make and make sure to tell them they look gorgeous. That will melt their hearts." Brian was up early next morning, ready for school and back to his macho style. However, there was a skip in his step, a smile and happiness I hadn't seen before. The last few weeks had been a roller coaster. Brian was confident enough to discuss even the most intimate and delicate things with me. He would make me blush many times, but I always found a way to get him the information he needed. His behavior and manner were significantly improved. That does not mean he became perfect. We still had occasions when he strayed, but not that many. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. No part of this story can be reproduced in any form or by any electronic or mechanical means without written permission from the author. All characters are fictitious, and any similarity to actual people, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental unless otherwise stated. Dear friends, thank you very much for watching. Leave comments, put likes, share with friends and subscribe to the channel. Story 2, welcome to Secret Story. My wife, Lynn, used to be as well, but over the past few years she has become less, how can I say, adventurous. Our life now exists of wham bam thank you ma'am, which really does little for me. If I lived in a city I would be likely out in the bars looking for someone with whom to relieve some of my frustration, but since I live in a small town, hours away from the nearest city, the possibilities are severely limited. That leaves the internet. That I was actually quite surprised how many women are out there who are as horny as I am and are willing to share their desires. It was unexpected that they would tell me about their fantasies while chatting online, but I was amazed that some would play with themselves while doing it. I was really thrilled when some of these women had cameras and would show themselves playing online. Wow, not being shy myself, I too got a camera and had a lot of fun sharing my playtime with some of these women. Having the camera was something I had to keep hidden from my wife though. I could not come up with a good excuse for having it, so I kept it secreted away and only brought it out when my wife was out of the house. Having this secret camera is the reason I got to see something I never thought I would. Lynn and I generally argue about little things, including who is doing more around the house. Her work is only part-time, so I get upset when I come home from work and find the house a mess when she has been home all day. She tells me that she is busy during the day, but I see little evidence of it. I decided to give myself an edge in our argument about what was going on at home, that I had seen advertisements on the internet about software that let you watch your house when you weren't home. I think it was meant for security, or to monitor your kids or something, but I thought that I could use it to see for myself what Lynn did at home when I was at work. I assumed I would see her sitting around watching soaps all day, chatting on the phone or whatever. Getting up early one morning, I hid the camera inside a vase that was on top of the entertainment center in the living room. Running the cable through the maze of wires that connected to the TV and stereo, I tucked it through the vent that was common to the living room and the study. I turned on the computer, connected the camera and saw that it gave a very good view of the living room. After downloading the software, I hid the icon for it, and left the computer on. I was all set up now to gather evidence that Lynn sat around and did nothing all day, and I left for work. Arriving at my office, I closed the door, sat at the computer, and typed in the web address that came with the spy software. I followed the simple instructions, and within a couple of minutes I was connected and in control of the computer at home. Very cool. I activated camera view and on my screen saw my living room. This was great. The house seemed to be quiet. Lynn must still be in bed. I decided to give her a call and get her up. If I had to be at work all day, at least she could be awake. Lynn answered the phone groggily, sleep coming through in her voice. "Hi," I said, still sleeping. Yeah. "Oh, sorry for waking you up," I lied. "I just wanted to ask you to get some shaving cream for me when you go shopping today." "Okay, I will." What time will you be home today?" "Oh, regular time I suppose." "Why?" "Oh, no reason, wondering what time to make supper is all." "Okay. I'll let you go then." "Okay. Bye." Bye. The phone went dead and I imagined I would see Lynn on the screen in a couple of minutes, since she was awake now and the trip to the washroom she would likely have to make would take her right through the living room. I didn't have to wait long before I saw her at the far end of the room coming through the door. Still in her nightgown, she stepped quickly through the room and then disappeared through the bathroom doorway. My work is quite technical, and my boss lets me pretty much run with it. He hardly ever comes to my office and asks what I am working on. He just emails assignments to me and leaves me alone. I will on occasion leave my door closed while I am working so I can concentrate, so I was pretty confident I could watch Lynn while at work and no one would be the wiser. Besides, I figured, I would just be checking every few minutes to confirm she was sitting on the sofa watching TV or whatever. I would still be able to work. While Lynn was in the washroom, I started on my first task at work while keeping the camera view open in a small window on my screen. I was working my way through a problem when I saw Lynn come out of the bathroom and park her on the sofa. Aha! Just as I expected, this was cool. I felt kinda mischievous watching Lynn while she was oblivious to me seeing her sitting there. Surprisingly, she only sat for a few moments then proceeded into the study. I lost sight of her as she stepped through the doorway. What is she doing now? I wondered. Probably on the computer. I thought that it was a good thing I had put the camera on hide mode. I realized something else as well. If she was going to be on the computer, I could see what she was doing. The software I had downloaded allowed me to secretly view the host computer screen. Cool. I looked into the help file of the spy software to figure how to see the screen at home. I carefully followed the directions and soon had Lynn's screen open in a window on my desktop. Man, this was so cool. I should be a private eye or something, I told myself. Soon I realized though that I had not been much of an investigator. While I watched Lynn's screen on the computer, I saw something that caught me completely off guard. Lynn opened the Yahoo chat site. That is the site that I always went to when I was looking to fool around online. I realized that there were many chat rooms in Yahoo and I'm sure some would be of interest to Lynn. Not all the sites were adult-oriented. Surely it would be a movies or crafts site that Lynn would be coming here for, I rationalized. I soon found out that was not the case, however. Immediately after she logged in she went to the married and looking site. What? That is where I always went. Had she seen my internet history? Did she know my login name? Did she find out that I was going here and was trying to find someone who knew me? I found that my fears of her trying to catch me fooling around were soon put to rest when I noticed her login name. It was 1456_wet_princess. What? Was she actually in Yahoo playing like I do? No, that didn't make sense. Sensible or not though, it was soon obvious she was doing just that. Directly after she entered the married but looking chat room she said about searching out men with cameras and asking to view. With a login name like wet_princess, most men immediately opened their camera to her. She soon had 4 cameras opened up for her. The men were in various. I was stunned. Lynn, who had been so disinterested lately, was now openly watching these men. I found many women that liked to share their play on camera with me. Was it possible Lynn would do that too? Lynn opened a chat window to one of the guys who was PLA. Would you? Yes please. No way. Lynn was loving this. I couldn't believe it. Another chat window opened as someone sent Lynn an instant message. Hi Lynn. How's my sweetie today? Jason. Great, yours? Who the hell was Jason, and why was he calling Lynn sweetie? So far so good. I've got today off. Do you? She asked. Yep. Whatcha doing? Oh, you know, watching. She typed. Working. Cindy must be Jason's wife. She knows this guy's wife's name. How long had they been chatting and whatever else on here? So is Brent. Is he? Yep, but I'm home all day all alone. Hang on, I'm gonna phone you. Okay. The typing in the chat window stopped and the mouse was stationary on the screen. It seemed that this Jason guy was what or who she was looking for in the chat room. My head was spinning. Here I thought my wife was just being lazy. And now she was going to be on the phone with some guy from the internet. In my camera view I now saw Lynn move from the study to the living room and pick up the phone. I had to assume it was Jason. She smiled as she talked and I could see her laugh as well. She appeared to really enjoy talking to this Jason guy. I was starting to get a bit more jealous and wished I knew what the conversation was about. They only talked for a couple of minutes before Lynn put down the phone, looked at her watch and hurried out of the room. I never even considered the work I was supposed to be doing. I was stunned by what I had seen over the last few minutes. My wife was around on the internet, talking to them on the phone. I was tempted to go home right now and confront her about it, but really didn't know what to say. Actually I was a bit interested in the fact that Lynn liked to watch men. I had always dreamed of a bit of a swinger's lifestyle, and if Lynn was into other men then maybe, I started to think about it. Would she want to? I considered that for a minute and realized that if I desired other women, why wouldn't she desire other men? As I sat there pondering the possibilities Lynn re-entered the living room. She was still in her nightgown but I could see that she had taken a shower because her hair was still wet as she sat down on the sofa. She sat there brushing her hair quietly for a few minutes, then suddenly she jumped up. Peeked out the curtains and then hurried out of the room. Someone was at the door I guessed. Lynn disappeared from view for a few minutes and then reappeared, and someone was with her. Oh. I realized. That Jason. Now I knew what Jason and Cindy. We had played baseball together last summer. They lived in the same town but we never socialized, or at least we never all socialized. It was apparent that Jason and Lynn were quite more than social. If he was with Lynn, with me being away at work, and her greeting him in her nightgown, it could only mean one thing. They were having an affair. All manner of things ran through my head now. How long had this been going on? I was really at a loss what to think or do. I was sure of one thing though. I was going to watch and find out exactly what was happening. It didn't take long to find that out. Lynn, still in her nightgown, sat down on the sofa and Jason sat beside her. She turned to him, quickly getting up. I went down the hall to tell my boss that I was going to have to go home for the rest of the day. I didn't want him looking for me. I then went back into my office, locked the door behind me, then sat down to see exactly what was going to happen. Although it was pretty obvious where it was heading, I had just been lucky how I had set the camera up. Lynn and Jason were in perfect view. I wondered if they ever considered that I would find out about them. I'm sure they never thought I would be sitting in my office watching them on my computer. This was incredible. I thought I should have set up a mic too. I had fortunately spent the extra $50 and bought a high-quality camera. Lynn now stood up and turning toward me, or the camera. I was surprised to find myself not mad or jealous. I was, in fact, still aroused. I wonder what that would taste like, I thought as I started to consider how I could bring up the subject to Lynn. Story 3, Welcome to Secret Story. Shelley is quietly laying in bed playing games on her phone beside Randy, her sleeping husband. Suddenly the phone buzzed in her hand. She hadn't been expecting anyone to text her at this time of night. But when it happened she knew immediately who it was. She quickly shifted her eyes to look at Randy and reflexively put her phone down beside her, afraid that he had heard it. It appeared that Randy was still sleeping beside her as she sat propped up in their bed. He hadn't stirred, yet she listened to his breathing and watched him for a few seconds to make sure he was still asleep. The soft light of the lamp on her bedside table gave her enough light to see that his face showed he was fully asleep. Shelley had been mindlessly playing Angry Birds and listening to music through an earpiece from her iPhone as her husband lightly snored beside her. She turned to her phone and saw that there was one new message. She opened the message app, and saw it was from Brittany, as she expected. She had set up Brent's contact name as Brittany, just in case. Hi. You're awake. Her heart fluttered. Contact with Brent did that to her, it excited her always. It was like being a teenager again. She texted back, yes, but I'm in bed, Randy is sleeping. Did you wear him out? Right. He came to bed and was out in 5 minutes. Aw, no fun for you tonight? Like any other night. I don't know how he can keep his hands off of you. Her heart skipped. Over the last few months there had been 3 times that she and Brent had been able to sneak away for a few hours. Brent certainly had been very attentive. He was attentive to her. Her needs, her body. He seemed to be completely enthralled with her. It was gratifying, flattering to be the center of someone's world even if for a few hours every once in a while. He seems to have no trouble keeping his hands to himself, she texts back. His loss, unfortunately yours too. Yeah, it has been way too long since I've, you know. Nope. Don't know. You'll have to tell me, he teased her. Yeah, right. You know full well what I mean. Nope. I'm completely unaware, tell me. Shelley smirked to herself. She liked it when he played with her, as she enjoyed all of the little games that they played. I'm sure you can figure it out, she texts back. It has to do with Randy not wanting any intimacy. And me not having the privacy to be intimate by myself. Shelley flushed at the thought of Brent playing with himself. OMG, really? Yes. I'm out of town for work in a hotel, all alone. Now that I hear your voice I'm so turned on, she texts back, okay. That isn't fair. I told you that I haven't in so long and now you're teasing me. Haven't what? Oh, is that what you meant? He texted. Yes, you knew full well what I meant. I just wanted to be sure. Yes, and chatting with you isn't helping, she texted. Shelley paused looking at the screen then turned to look at Randy. He was still snoring laying on his back beside her. She'd love to right now, with Brent, but how? What do you mean, she sent. Where is the earpiece that came with your phone? I'm listening to music with it, why? Because if you really want to see we could FaceTime. Shelley again looked at Randy. He was still zonked out. We can't, she sent. If you use the earpiece the phone won't make any sound. Well, there was one thing she wanted more. But what if Randy heard or saw? If I get up to go to another room Randy will wake up, he always does when I get up at night. I guess you'll just have to be quiet, he sent. I just can't. Randy is wry. Shelley was typing into the phone when it buzzed in her hand. Shelley was on edge and the phone buzz made her jump. Brittany's FaceTime request was displayed on the screen. Shelley turned to Randy in wide-eyed nervousness. He made some noise and turned to his side, facing away from Shelley. She was torn between receiving the request or not. What if she was caught? She pressed accept. The music that she had been listening to was muted and she heard in her earpiece Brent's voice. Hi gorgeous. I know you can't talk. I can see you a little bit, it is pretty dark there. Can you hear me? If you can just nod. Shelley looked at her phone. Although it was quite dark in her bedroom, Brent's hotel was apparently quite well lit as she could see him clearly. He was obviously on the bed in his hotel room. She could see the typical hotel room furnishings behind him. She nodded slowly and smiled back at him. Good, he said, you are so gorgeous. I know you have to stay quiet, so I'll do the talking, okay? Shelley nodded and slid down from her propped position on the bed. She could not believe she was going through with this. Do you really want to? She nods. Do you really want to see me? She nods again. It feels good, doesn't it, Shelley? Shelley opens her eyes again and looks to the phone and nods. She stifles it as best she can but knows she was louder than she expected. As she listens to her husband's breath beside her, she watches her phone inches from her face. Again Shelley cannot suppress, "Sure sweetheart. You'll wake up Randy," he reprimands her. He is still asleep. She nods in response. Okay, be careful. Too bad you can't be loud like me, he tells her. She opens her eyes wide into the camera and nods her head strongly in jerky, almost erratic motions. She is only beginning to catch her breath when she is aware that Randy is moving beside her. In a panic she turns the phone over, screen down, and tries to lay as still as she can. She feels him rise up to look over her shoulder. He places his hand on her shoulder and speaks quietly to her. Shelley, Shelley. Wake up, you're having a dream. Shelley murmurs, pretending to be waking from sleep. What? Are you okay? Randy asks. You were thrashing about and making all kinds of noise. Yeah, I'm fine, she answers. Well, you're all hot and sweaty. It must have been a pretty nasty dream. Then from the earpiece in her ear, more like you were nasty and the dream was hot and sweaty. Good night.